Well, guys, I would like to welcome all of you to the American Majority's Last Dash Fundraising Crash Course webinar. Matt Batzel is going to, or Batesel rather, is going to make some introductory remarks. Matt, I was wondering if you could hear me out there. I don't seem to have a, for some reason it's just got you with a phone here with a slash through it, and usually it has a microphone, so I'm wondering if you may have a hard time speaking to the audience. Right now, for those of you who are on hold, most of you out there are muted because we have so many people on there on the call. I'm going to try to unmute folks. Before I do that, if you will, if you've got any background noise, if you're in your home, if you're in your car, if you will mute your own phone or mute your own audio device, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll have to mute everybody on the call because it can get pretty distracting. So I'm going to go ahead and go through here and begin to open up everybody so that we can have a conversation. We've got about 20 people on the call, so just, if you will, make sure that you don't have any background noise. Okay, it looks like we've got Matt on the line. So what we're going to probably do is, we've got a lot of folks with background noises. We're going to mute everybody, take Matt and put him on here. It looks like he is good to go now. Matt, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Brandon.
There we go. So I apologize for those of you all out there, but there's about 4 or 5 of you, and I can't determine which have lots of background noise, and it was creating feedback, probably because you don't have a headset. So Matt, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself and introduce American Majority.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. My name is Matt Batesel. I'm the Wisconsin Executive Director for American Majority, the nation's leading conservative grassroots training organization. And American Majority really exists to help the grassroots, whether it be candidates or activists, to win politically. So we want to help to, teach you guys and equip you to run effective campaigns. We do candidate trainings where we go through everything from how to put together a campaign plan, to come up with a win number, to how to fundraise and have the money in your campaign that you will need in order to win. And so that's partially why we are teaming up here with Brandon Lewis to bring an expert in the field of fundraising to you this evening. So I thank you all for joining. I do want to raise your awareness of the resources that we have on our website. It's americanmajority.org. And on our resources tab right at the top, there are lots of resources for candidates, for campaign managers, and also activists. And so I think we have some candidates on here tonight. We also have some potential campaign managers and some leaders of organizations, as well as key grassroots activists across the state of Wisconsin. So thank you for all that you're doing. We want to help to be a resource for you. We're a 501c3 organization, a nonprofit, and we're nonpartisan. So we're limited in how we can do that, but one of the ways we can do that is by holding webinars or trainings like we're doing this evening. So thanks again, and let me introduce our speaker, Brandon, who you've been hearing from here at the beginning. Brandon Lewis has worked as a political fundraiser and staff member to U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, State Senate, State Representative, and local political campaigns. He has also worked in the nonprofit fundraising arena on capital campaigns in educational institution environments and grassroots event fundraising for a national medical nonprofit organization. He's the founder and owner of www.mycampaignTreasurer.com. His web-based fundraising application allows candidates to raise more money for their federal, state, and local campaigns through a simplified, focused approach. Lewis is also the author of How to Raise Money for Political Office, the original guide to winning elections through aggressive, organized fundraising, which I've read and I highly recommend. It offers a comprehensive, practical approach on how campaigns can raise more money for their campaigns in an efficient and effective manner. And so I'd like to introduce Brandon Lewis. Thanks again for leading this tonight, Brandon.
Well, Matt, thank you. I have to slip you a 5 spot for that stellar introduction a little later. Thank you for having us on. I'll keep you unmuted, so if you want to chime in at any time, by all means feel free, and then when we get to the question and answer section at the end, I'm going to try to unmute everyone so that we can kind of have a conversation. But if you are out there and if you've got a situation where you've got a microphone and your speakers at the same time and they're close to one another, it creates a feedback loop in the program. So hopefully by the time we get to questions and answers, we can address those. And also, if you'll submit them on the menu that you have, I'll try to get to those at the end as well. As Matt so kindly mentioned, I put a slide in here about my background. We've covered that, so we'll move on. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to cover some basics in fundraising very quickly. I'm going to gloss over this a little quicker than I typically do. And then we're going to get down to things that you can do in your state as you approach your primaries and your general elections. But however, I've found that if you don't lay a little bit of a foundation, people can get off track. So we're going to get started with this very quickly. Often people who run grassroots campaigns get the impression that it's either or, that either you can raise a lot of money and that you're an establishment candidate, or that you run a grassroots campaign. And I've seen these two dynamics play out over and over again. The fact is you can have both, or you can have a mixture of both. And having a decent war chest, a large war chest is better, but even a small, respectable war chest provides a wider range of options. I've worked on campaigns over and over again where one candidate had more money than the other, and it just really hamstrung the lesser funded candidate in what they could do. Even direct contact through voters, through volunteer efforts, requires some kind of resource to facilitate that contact. Even if you're putting people in a minivan, they're going door to door, you still have to get gas, you still have to buy pizza, you still have to have some kind of walk list, some kind of program typically to generate a walk list, a PC, collateral to pass out. So even when you're running the shoestring budget campaigns, you still need some resources to act as a catalyst. As you get into larger campaigns, and even in small campaigns where you want to run a textbook or a best practices campaign, things like direct mail, almost everyone's going to have to, at a bare minimum, have a website and signage, printed collateral. And then in larger races, you're going to have radio, TV, internet advertising. And radio and TV and direct mail is very expensive. And there are some overhead that you'll likely, or there is some overhead that you'll likely incur if you throw up a campaign headquarters in a strip mall or an office park. If you decide to, in the last few days of your campaign, to hire someone, or if you're running a large enough campaign where you can do that at the very beginning. So raising some money is a reality. And often people kind of, I wouldn't say get upset at this statement, but with all things being equal, the candidate with the most money to communicate his message will likely win. And notice that I say all things being equal. If somebody has 3 times as much money as you, but they are running a terrible ground game, they've got a terrible candidate with a terrible story, an inadequate get out the vote, there are strengths and weaknesses. There are about 4 or 5 components in every campaign. Fundraising is a very important component, but if you are similar in all those other facets of campaigning, yet one of you has more money, then the people out, the voters out in the district are going to hear about that candidate's message 3, 2, 4 times more often than your own. And even a mediocre message repeated 3, 4, 5 times is better than a perfect message that they never get to hear, that they only hear once or twice, because repetition is the key to learning. It's also the key in advertising in many ways. One thing I do like specifically about fundraising is that cash on hand isn't some kind of ethereal, subjective thing that people can say. People can't ever look at you and say that you're not doing better at fundraising than the other person if you actually are. People may argue that your message isn't as good, that you're not as good a candidate, that you don't stand for the right things, and also it's very difficult to quantify ground game, phone banking. People always feel like that the wind is to their back in a campaign, but cash on hand is indisputable. Either you've got it in the bank or you don't. It's publicly known. It legitimizes your campaign. If people see that you've raised a decent amount of money, they think, this person's really got a shot. They're taking this seriously. It deters competitors, either if you are an incumbent or a challenger. If somebody sees that you have got an early start and you've raised a lot of money, it's something to think about because they know that they're going to have to work very hard to compete with you. And then lastly, it builds momentum. People tend to give to campaigns that have already had some degree of success, and it's unfortunate, especially if you start late sometimes, but it's the truth of the matter. The personal narrative. There are 6 quick questions that people must have answered in their minds before they will give you a dime. And we're going to go through those real quick. And there's lots of different ways that you'll talk about your personal narrative. You may do it in TV and radio, in a palm card, on your website, as you talk to civic organizations, as you recruit volunteers, but specifically as you speak to donors, your personal narrative is important. The first thing people want to know is, who are you? Where did you grow up? What's your professional background? Who were your parents? Did you have a rural upbringing, an urban upbringing? Are you from here? Is there something distinctive about you that people can latch on to? Folks identify with a good story. Why are you running? This is not the opportunistic reason that many people often talk about why they're running, which is, well, it's a good time. Well, I think I can really win this. Well, so-and-so's retiring. It needs to be centered around that donor's needs. What can you do to give them more freedom, to decrease regulations if they're a business owner, to reduce taxes if that's of interest to them, to champion moral issues if that's something that is on their agenda? Then that is very, very important. So do not ever talk to people about your interests so much as their interests and how you can help them, because that's really what they're asking for when they ask you why you're running. What do you believe? This is often thought of as your platform, or what are the 3 to 5 issues that really define you. You can get into the weeds with people, but as you communicate your message, even to donors, you have to stay on message. And having the 4 or 3 pillars of your campaign that are really what you're going to enumerate over and over again is very important. What makes you different from your competition? People often shy away from this, and you really shouldn't, because there are only 4 things that happen in a campaign. You tell people about yourself, you tell people about your competition tells people about themselves, and your competition tells people about you. And if you fail to draw a distinction between you and your competitor and real good stark contrast, then you leave 50% of the conversation off the table, and that's usually not wise. That doesn't mean that you have to get down in the mud, but if there are principal differences on beliefs, votes, any number of ideology, vision, it's important to bring those out so people can understand why you're better than the other person. Can you win this election? People want to know if you have a decent shot at winning. The ways that you could reassure them that you can do that is to talk about your strategy, your campaign team, your ideology, endorsements that you've gotten, articles that are written, polls that you could share with them, a good campaign plan, a fundraising plan. People want to, just like any business venture, if you had a relative that said, hey, I'm going to start a company, and I would like you to invest in this company, you would really want to know, and you would probably ask questions that essentially revolved around whether or not that company would be viable, and people want to know if your election is going to be viable, so give them reasons to believe in you. Lastly, tell people how they can get involved when it comes to soliciting donors, particularly in this late stage of the game. That's when you have to ask them, you're going to ask them for a few things. Their time, if they're going to be volunteer fundraisers for you, if they're going to serve on a finance committee. You're going to ask them for their reputation to be listed on fundraising letters, on fundraising invitations. You're going to ask them for their money. After-tax income, as we all know, does not come easy these days, and if they are going to give you a lot of it, then you need to make sure that you do your best for them. And another reason to think about fundraising as being very important, and if you've tuned out, tune back in, this is important. If you've got people out there knocking on doors for you and writing op-eds and blogging and doing social media and showing up to events and making phone calls and holding signs, you owe it to them to try to do fundraising to the best of your ability, because if they're putting in their time and effort, you really, even if fundraising is not your strong suit, even if it makes you uncomfortable, for their sake, I always feel that people owe it to their volunteers to also focus on fundraising, even if they are really more of a grassroots style candidate. So make sure that when your people ask, how can I get involved, that you say, here's a donation slip. I really need you and your wife to do $1,000. Give them something specific that they can do. I need you to host. I need you to raise $5,000. Be specific with them. To determine your fundraising goals, first you have to identify your target voter database, calculate how many times and through what mediums you need to contact them to communicate your message adequately. Why am I talking about this late in the game? Believe it or not, there's some people that still haven't bought their signs, figured out what they're doing. They're out there just kind of flailing around, so to speak, in the grassroots landscape. Just keep in mind that it's not that you are only going to spend what you can raise. That's what so many people are left to do if they're weak in their fundraising. It's that you have a campaign plan based on how many times you're going to mail someone, knock on their door, call them, how many times they're going to see you on TV and radio on average, and all the other things that go into a campaign. That's really what makes a goal. So make sure that you at least have a good idea of what your target should be. Start on election day. Work your way backward. It's very important because this will let you know when things have to be raised, and because you have to, it's not like you just purchase all of your signs, all of your advertising, everything all at once. It's done in stages. So you'll have to have so much cash on hand and before you can ever even make your first sign order, your first palm card order, your TV, your radio purchases. And people are reluctant, and rightfully so, to give to politicians, especially if they're not incumbents on any kind of credit or pay me in 30 days. They usually want their money up front because so many of them in the past have been left out to dry. When it comes to your campaign budget, and this is important for those of you especially that are already in the middle of a race, if you decided that your goal was $10,000, $20,000, $100,000, and all of a sudden you see that your opponent is raising $200,000, $20,000, or twice as much as you, your campaign goal can no longer be what it was. Your campaign does not exist in a vacuum, so you have to account for what the other person is doing and make sure that you have at a minimum parity, and it's better to have 3 times as much, 2 times as much. Any factor greater than 1 is always helpful. And one other thing you have to do is think about supplementary and complementary campaigns. And what I mean by that is there are some campaigns that may supplement yours. Maybe you've got a big mayoral race and you're running for city council, or you've got a big governor's race and you're running for state rep. Sometimes other organizations and other campaigns can suck money out of the political landscape. So keep in mind all those kinds of things when you're raising money. To get started, we talked about your campaign narrative. Create a candidate profile sheet. I'll show you where you can get an example of these, some of these things we're talking about before we get off the webinar here. And format a contribution form. A candidate profile sheet is just a one-page document that says who you are. It answers the 6 questions of your narrative, because invariably people are going to want that in physical form or to be emailed to them in a PDF format. And then a contribution form is just designed specifically so you can check an amount that they want to give. Then you can mail it or email it to them, and it has all of the forms or has all of the spaces where you can collect information specific to fundraising, and I'll show you some examples of those and where you can get them again toward the end. Next, and we'll talk about this a little in depth later, many people, even at this late of the stage in the game, have not mapped out all their personal spheres of influence. And what I mean by that is they have not really, even at this point, taken out their BlackBerry or iPhone, gotten every single person out of there that they can ask for $50 or more from, all the way up to 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. They've not gone through their Facebook account and really just mulled over it and even put those people on a list that you might have went to college with 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it's a little bit of a reach, but you still stay in touch every once in a while. People have not thought about the people that they go to church with, the people they work with, the people that work with their wives. They really are reluctant to ask those people for money. And I always have said that if you're not willing to ask your grandmother for $500 or $50 or $100 or whatever she could afford, then you're probably not really ready to raise money for your race as well as you could. So make sure that you've got all those. And right beside them in an Excel sheet, assign a specific donation amount for solicitation. Always shoot high. Worst case scenario, someone will tell you if you ask them for $1,000, they can only do $500. So always ask high. And then when you total it up on the bottom, you may find that even at this stage in the game, you've got $50,000, $60,000, $120,000, $20,000 left over that you have not asked people for. Invariably, half of the people are going to give you something, probably somewhere around your target, and probably more if this is your close list of friends and associates. So make sure that you've done that if you haven't done it to date. Be ambitious, yet informed. You don't want to ask somebody who can give $5,000 for $500. At the same time, it probably doesn't make sense to ask somebody only who can give $500 for $5,000. It does not, it's not too far of a stretch to ask somebody who can only give $500 $1,000 though. So, be within reason, but don't leave any money on the table. Typical spheres of influence: work, church, family, and friends. Go through those personal electronic devices and social network sites that you belong to and political groups you're affiliated with, and really just dig. You'd be surprised how many people around you that you should ask for money that you probably haven't yet, and who, if asked, would give, and people who you would think always get asked, but because everybody is so reluctant to ask people for money, probably hasn't been asked this election cycle, or not by as many people as you might think. Perfect examples of targeted donors: you've got somebody you've worked for 2 or 3 years, Jim Watson. He can give you $2,000. That's a maximum. You've got a lady that plays organ at church. Ask her for $250, and maybe you've got a friend who's been a lifelong friend who's got a pretty decent business or a decent job, and you think he can give $1,000. You do this repeat this exercise with these 3 people about 10 other times or 20 times, and you'll see that these numbers in aggregate start adding up. Also, research your historically active donors. Everything's publicly available out there, and I know this sounds like these aren't really, and we'll get into some more last-minute strategies toward the end, but what I have found when I sit down with what I call troubled candidates, and that's candidates who during this stage of the game have not really performed fundraising-wise as well as they had liked, when I ask them if they have done these things, most of the time they haven't. It's not necessarily that they've done everything right and they are looking for an additional silver bullet. It's more usually when they come to me, and this stage of the game is just that they have not done the basics, didn't know the basics, were reluctant to do them, didn't want to do them. So that's why we're covering these, because invariably the same diseases are caused by the same things over and over again. There's nothing new about it. And when you put these people on and you look at who is historically given, you start with your largest donors first. They're the ones that have probably already been hit up 4 or 5 times, but it will not come as any surprise to them if you come and ask them for money. But never forget, as you go there, to ask them, who do you know who? And by that I mean, when you sit down in front of somebody who in aggregate over the last 4 or 5 years has given $50,000, $10,000, $5,000, $6,000 to state and local and federal candidates, when you meet with them and ask them for money, you need to say, and tune in if you've tuned out. This is important. Who do you know who would be interested in this race that I could ask for $500? Or who do you think I should be contacting? And just sit there for a while. Some of them will give you a list of 20 people. Some of them will give you a list of 3. Some of them won't give you anything. Somebody will do something in between. And then you say, well, do you have a phone number or an email where I could contact them so you don't have to fish around for it? And then lastly say, would it be okay if I used your name, Mr. Jones? If you contact 30 people, and on average those people give you 3 names, and although there'll be some overlap, you can probably get 60, 70 additional names. This is a very good way to get people to ask for money, and they've already been filtered by someone for you who understands fundraising. There are a lot of reasons that people give. Donors give because of personal relationships with the candidate, passion for shared ideology, access to the candidate, opposition to your opponent. They may not like you, but they hate him. That's often a reason people give. Peer pressure, just good old-fashioned, I've done business with you a long time. I'd like you to support this candidate. Good old-fashioned, I gave to your kid's Little League. I want you to give to this state rep race. And some people that's what they do, and it's just social interaction. They enjoy going to fundraisers. They enjoy being plugged in, and that's why they give. Mainly, however, people give because they were asked. Think about it. When the Salvation Army is ringing a bell outside of Walmart or any other retail organization, if they were not there ringing that bell, would you mail in that donation to the Salvation Army? Of course not. The only reason you gave is because they reminded you to give. Same thing when a kid shows up at your door selling Girl Scout cookies or Boy Scout peanuts or popcorn. You weren't going to chase someone down to give to them. You gave because they asked, and it's not always that you wanted the cookies or that you wanted the peanuts or that you wanted to give to the Salvation Army. Maybe you wanted to get somebody's parents off your back. Maybe the kid was just too cute. Maybe you really just felt guilty. Guilt's also a good motivator. We all know this. Because you hadn't done what you wanted to that Christmas season for the needy, so you drop in $5, $10, $1, 50 cents into the Salvation Army pot. Remember, if you screw everything else up, if you will just simply ask often and ask repeatedly, you're in better shape than if you did nothing else. And even if you did it all wrong, you're in better shape if you do it wrong 20 times than if you do it perfectly right 3 times. Spend the majority of your time focusing on those donors who can give and raise the most money. People often get stuck in this situation where they waste all their time on $10 fundraisers or just put a bowl out and let people come, and they're kind of fundraisers but they're kind of friend raisers, and it's okay to do those towards the beginning. And once you have contacted all of the major donors, and by major donors that can just be people you know really well who will give you $200, that might be a major donor for your campaign, or it could be that you are soliciting those historical givers. It could be any number of those things. So just make sure that, just like if you were in business and you were trying to sell laundry detergent, you would want to go to the retailers that sold the most laundry detergent. You wouldn't want to go door to door to each individual person and ask them to buy a gallon of laundry detergent. It'd be too inefficient and too expensive for you. So just use your time wisely. There are fundraising methods you can use even now at this last minute: personal visits, phone calls, formal and informal events, email solicitations, social media, and direct mail. We're going to talk about these in turn very quick. Personal visits. When you go out to see somebody, visit with them. Begin with an end in mind. Don't go out there. This is not a social call. If this were, a year ago or 6 months ago or 9 months ago, maybe it could be a social call and then you just warm them up. But now you really need to be asking people for money. It's not ideal, but get in front of them and ask them. They know that it's coming. Begin with an end in mind, and that could be, I want this person, just write it down on a piece of paper before you go there. I want this person and his wife to give $2,500, or I want them to serve on a host committee and raise $10,000, or I want this person to give me 20 names to contact and use their name, or I just want $100 out of this person. Whatever it is, make sure that you begin with an end in mind, and and there are two things, again, when donors, you're asking them for their time and their money. So make sure that you know what you're wanting and you try to get both. Phone calls. Phone calls stink. Nobody likes to make them. Really, no one likes to make them. I'm a fundraiser, and I do not specifically like making a big wad of phone calls. But don't count the yeses, count the nos. And the reason I say that is because the yeses are buried in the nos. If you swing enough times, you're going to hit often. And just every day, when you say that you set a goal between now and election day, I'm going to make 20 calls, I'm going to make 10 visits a week, whatever it is, if you will just count the yes, count the no's and not the yeses, you'll get there. Get in a quiet, distraction-free place. There are 1,000 things in a campaign that will draw your attention away in your personal life and your work life. Sit down and dedicate a specific time. Have your candidate call sheet and your envelope and a note there handy so that as soon as you get off the phone with somebody and they say, yes, I'll give you $1,000, $100, $200, you get that thing in the mail, or better yet, if it's a big enough check and for your campaign that might be $200, it might be $2,000, you say, hey, can I come over there and pick that thing up right now? Can I do it right now? Can I send somebody over? There are a lot of pledges in a campaign will evaporate, so getting to them quickly is very important. Event fundraising. Set the dates way in advance. You may not have that luxury here, but give it at least a couple of weeks to be worked well. 2.5 weeks, you can probably put together something decent. Mail out the invitations a week before. The big important thing with event fundraising, in my opinion, is that you have about 60 to 70% of your funds committed before you ever have a fundraiser. If you don't have a host committee with 60% of your goal on it, don't mail out the invitation. Just stick with the phone calls, because really your event should be, fundraising events have 2 events in them, and the first one is putting together the host committee, and the second one's actually having the event. And then the thing that drives events and doing well is communication from the campaign, or more specifically, communication from the candidate. So make certain that you mail people, call them, email them, call them, and email them. You can hardly contact people too much, and even when you think people like the host committee are going to be there, often they'll find things to do and won't show up, so double check with them too. Don't get hung up on the fun stuff like logistics, food, decorations, music. People get they want to plan a birthday party for a 12-year-old. That's not what this is. You're there to raise money. If you will just get the names and the commitments financially on the paper and the location, the rest of it will take care of itself. It really will. That's the most important thing that you can focus on. Direct mail and email. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because typically for state and local campaigns, and even congressional to a point, mail and email just is not a big part of your overall strategy. You almost have to get statewide, but it can be a tool. But if you've only got a limited amount of time and resources and you're this late in the game, I'd say focus on the things that produce the largest result in return for your time. But if you are going to do it, don't reinvent the wheel. Take $100, split it up a few ways, and mail it into some people so that you can look at fundraising examples from conservative organizations and candidates that you believe in. And I'll be honest and get out there on a limb. I even give to sometimes the DNC, and I'll mail in $10 to Barack Obama just to see what he's mailing out. It costs him more to mail me than it does for me to than the donation that I send him. But sometimes you keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I like to see what they're doing because sometimes they do a better job than we do with direct mail solicitations and emails. So get on social media, send in some money online, and you will have a trove of examples to look at. They've paid people thousands and thousands of dollars to write and pen these. Find some things in there and some components that you like and just follow their example. There are books written on fundraising. I've written one, and we talk about fundraising letters in detail. You can purchase those. Mal Warwick did a great job how to write effective fundraising letters. So if you want to learn how to do it on your own, it'll take you a lot more time, but those are some resources that you can do. Website, social media, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the most important thing to realize with this is that you must provide dynamic content and build a relationship online before you ever ask for the first dollar. These people have to feel like they are your friend on Facebook, that you are providing them with good quality information, that you really have created an online environment that's rich with content. Now, granted, sometimes a website is just a place to send people to give online donations when they want to give you a credit card, and sometimes you punch that information in yourself, and just as a donation portal, it has value. But if you ever want folks to actually use your website, you have to, or your social media for fundraising, you have to put enough content on there for them to like it. And then when you do ask, knock it out of the park. Do it infrequently so they don't feel like you're just there to raise money from them, and you should have some pretty good results from it. Direct contact from the candidate is going to be your primary catalyst for generating dollars, and there's no substitute for personal contact. I put it this way. If people that are running for Congress and United States Senate and even the President of the United States has to get on the phone and recruit committee members to raise money for them, if you're running for state and local office, you better believe that you're going to have to do it too. And you're going to have to be good at it if you want to ensure the highest probability of your success. And I would tell you, between now and Election Day, instead of focusing on how much you raise each week, month, or quarter, even though you need to have a fundraising plan, you need to back those numbers up to figure out what kind of next action steps that you can commit to on a daily and weekly basis that will ultimately produce that amount of income. And what I mean by that is, just like if you're in sales and you've got a $10,000 a month, or that sounds too low, you have a $30,000 a month quota and you're in sales. Well, you can't just go out and just find $30,000 in business. You have to probably visit 3 people a day. You probably have to make 10 phone calls a day. You probably have to present 2 presentations a week. You probably need to have 1 kind of informational meeting a month. There's a number of things that you can do, and if you do all those things, the numbers will work themselves out. And this is an example. Say May. You're going to have 2 events, 3 marathon group call days, and that's where you drag some of your people in the finance committee into your headquarters, give them a list and say, hey, will you call and ask these people for money? You're going to do 20 visits. That means that every day you're going to see 1 person and ask them for money. 1 letter and 1 email this month. You may not do a letter every month, probably wouldn't. Usually in congressional campaigns you find that they go out about once a quarter, unless they're just in a real heated, contested race. Daily goals. Every day you're going to call 20 people, you're going to visit 1 person, and you're going to add 5 donors to the database. And weekly you're going to have 1 group visit. That could be going down to a manufacturing plant, meeting with a group of executives. That could be going over to a doctor's office and meeting with some medical professionals. It could be anything. You just get people around a table. If you will do these every month, eventually things will show up on the other end for you. They really will, but you focus on the inputs, and the outputs will take care of themselves. It's just like if you wanted to lose 10 pounds in 2 months. You can't just go lose it. You'd have to say, well, I'm going to eat 200 less calories a day. I'm going to work out 3 times a week. I'm going to change my diet up a little bit. If you did those things, results would have to follow. With fundraising, if you'll be methodical, persistent, and habitual in your efforts, then things will happen. Common pitfalls. Number 1, distraction. There are so many things in a campaign that are more fun, but none, in my opinion, that are more crucial than raising money. I want to go speak to the Rotary Club. I want to go to my Tea Party meeting. I've got to have a strategy session over at so-and-so coffee shop. I need to talk to the people over at the courthouse. I've got to design my website. I need to work on my mailer. I mean, there's all kinds of more fun things to do. But there's not anything hardly that pays off better for your campaign if you spend, an hour going door to door and you meet 30 people. And that's probably good in an hour. You might meet 15, and people are home less and less and come to the door less and less. If you spent that hour raising money and you raised $1,500, how many people could you reach with direct mail or with radio or with some other medium that you had purchased. One of the most important and crucial assets that a campaign has is the candidate's time. Just make sure you're using it wisely. And when you do decide to work on fundraising, allocate specific amounts of time and resources exclusively to fundraising and make them sacrosanct. Every day from 9 till 12, I'm working on fundraising and nothing else. And you cannot pry me out of my office to do anything else. And even though I'd rather be doing anything else, that's the only thing I'm going to do. Excessive expense, save your resources for voter contact. Don't let them get eaten up in overhead. Keep events as simple and affordable as possible. Fundraising events should be wine if appropriate, cheese, refreshments, some finger foods, in a nice environment that's easy to get to with a guest speaker if you're lucky, that are basically, big justifications for call of funds, and that's what they should be. And, don't get a fancy headquarters. Don't spend money where it's not related to voter contact if you can. You have to have a certain amount of overhead to facilitate what you're doing as a campaign, but don't spend your money foolishly. Disorganization. I do not know. There are just a lot of campaigns that live in Excel hell, is what I like to call it. They've got spreadsheets out the yin-yang, donor cards spread all over the place. Find yourself some software. I've developed some at mycampaignTreasure.com, or get on the internet and find some. Not having good organizational tools, electronic organizational tools, you can kind of get by with it in the short run, but there comes a point, and it doesn't take but about a month or two, when you actually end up burning more resources trying to not do it right than you do for the rest of the campaign doing it right. So even if you're a little bit behind now, if you've got somebody who can sit and do data entry, I'd catch yourself up with some kind of software system to manage your donors. And if you get elected, you really will have wished that you had done that. And year after year, it becomes even more of a compounded problem if you don't have them. And I'm not talking just about software, but physical organizational tools. Devote manila folders, organize your desktop and your computer for fundraising correctly, inboxes, having a specific way to process the tons of inputs that come in from fundraising. And by inputs, that means building databases, who you talk to, when you talk to them, did they pledge anything, who did they tell you to get in touch with. There are a sea of details with fundraising, and that's another reason people avoid it. So get tools together that can help you. I'm going to show you real quickly here some things that you can use that are free on a website. And this is American Majority's website, which I've given you the link to already for those of you who don't know. This is my website. Real quickly, I'm going to show you the documents that we talked about earlier. There are all kinds of things on here, but these specifically, at the very bottom on quick links, we've got example campaign files. If you want documents, everything that you ever probably would need is located right here. Letters, budgets, donor cards, campaign narratives, different kinds of reply devices, email examples, you name it, call sheet examples, an event checklist. All this is right here, and you can sign up, and all that's free to use. We've also got, features and tours for the fundraising software that I've developed. The easiest thing, if you'd like to find out about this, is there are tons of videos on this website. The easiest one probably is the one on the front. If you'll just click here, it'll give you an overview if that's something you're interested in. You can buy the political fundraising book if you're interested in it off the website. You can also, if you're more of a Amazon.com person, you can buy it here. Once you read it, I would encourage you to do like so many people have done, is they've wrote me a little review here, which has been very helpful, and I appreciate people being so kind to do that. There's a forum here if you have questions and you think about them later, and if you would like to ask them, if you'll put them here, I will answer them. I really mean that. So it's if you'll post it, I'll answer it. There's some blogs here that have some good information that you can read. Some of it, I'll be frank, is for SEO content. And if you need any help, there's some other good resources on the bottom here. Some political service providers, and also some of the seminars that have been recorded previously, webinars, are on here, and this one I will send out to all of y'all when we're done. Let's get back into the presentation, but do note that especially for the campaign, especially for your campaign documents, there are terrific documents there, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But the thing is, and what I'll say about good tools is, if a carpenter showed up to your house and you had contracted with him to build a deck, and if he showed up without a saw, without a hammer, without anything that a person who really does that professionally has, let's say, just had junky tools, he could probably still build a deck, but you would know immediately that he's not professional. If you're trying to raise money without good software and without tools, it just makes it very difficult, and it becomes apparent to yourself that you're not going about it in as a professional way as you can. Call reluctance. This is another huge pitfall, and you have to conquer your fear that death will ensue when you call or visit to ask for money. And I mean, as people feel like, they say that I guess the biggest fear that people have is public speaking. I would say it's asking for money, because I know tons of politicians and people that run for office who are happy to speak to people but will not raise money. And I always tell people, open up your obituaries in your local paper and read how people die. Heart attack, diabetes, obesity-related diseases, car wrecks, cancer. No one I've ever seen, it said cause of death, made a fundraising phone call for their campaign. But you would think that that's what killed people, because people are so reluctant to pick up the phone and call people and ask them for money. So, after you get a few of them under your belt, it'll get easier, and you'd be amazed at what you can accomplish. Procrastination. Fundraising cannot really be expedited. The earlier you start, the more money you raise, the more donors you capture, then the larger the average contribution will be. Although, when you get into a position where if you have not done as well as you'd liked up to this point, you can still do marvelous things. Not as marvelous as if you'd started a year ago, being real, persistent and methodical, but you can still make huge strides, But now is the time. Or tomorrow is the time. Get out there and do it. Here are some considerations and tactics for last-minute fundraising, and we're going to go through this and try to wrap it up quick and ask questions. I want to get y'all off in time. The good thing, and this is very good, if you have done very poorly in your fundraising to date, even a slight improvement can be huge for your campaign. Huge. If you've only raised a pittance of money, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, depending on the size of your campaign, well, what if you've doubled that or tripled that between now and Election Day? If you've done poor in your fundraising efforts to this point, you can you can double or triple what you've already got in the bank, and that would be huge if you'd just do what we've talked about tonight. And one thing to always remember is, and so many people pride themselves on being like really awesome grassroots candidates. There are different things that you have to have. You have to be a good grassroots candidate. You have to be a good candidate. That means speak well, be polished, be well liked. You have to raise money. You have to organize well. Well, there are so many chains, or so many links in a chain. And if your weakest link right now is fundraising, it does not do you any good, or it does you less good to strengthen those other links until you get that fundraising link fixed. And you can make it much stronger. If you're on parity or better than your opponent, except in the fundraising arena, and if you just increase your fundraising yield a couple of times, it would make a huge difference, especially if you're outpacing them in other grassroots areas. So make sure that you do that. Very important. Revisit your list of personal friends, family, and acquaintances, and see if you've really exhausted all of your closest, warmest contacts. I have people come to me all the time, and sometimes folks will get them to me because they're in the last parts of their campaign, And what I find is they have not even done this often. Revisit and really make sure that you've gone through and found every single person that you can. Most candidates haven't. They really haven't. How much time, and this can be painful for you, are you actually spending per day on fundraising? An hour? 30 minutes? 4 hours? None? If you really, sometimes if you think, well, my fundraising is just going terribly, I've not done well at it. If you look and really be honest with yourself and figure out how much time you're spending, you may find that you're just not putting in the time. And make the example of going to the gym. Reading the fitness books is great. Putting on the appropriate clothes is great. Getting to the gym is awesome. Walking into the gym is awesome. But unless you sit down and actually work out on the machines, you really haven't quite done what matters most. And so make sure that you are spending time. If you're not spending time, then that's probably the culprit. And people, make sure you look through the public records and identify all the people who are the top tier donors. Even if you don't have time to put together a huge database, skim through them, pick out the biggest ones, and try to meet with them. And then also look for people who have given to conservative organizations nationally, who have only given to usually a lot of your conservative organizations. If you find that somebody has given to them in their political smaller amounts, they've basically just given to mail or telemarketing. How much more likely would those people be to give to you if they get called by a real live conservative candidate who's running in their local races? These people often just get untouched. They end up being, hit by mail, and that's it. So those are good people, and they respond well to candidate calls. Go back to the well. If you've only raised $5,000, try to find another $5,000 from new people. But if it's been a couple of months since someone's given and they haven't maxed out, and if you feel like you're headed in the right direction and you can talk to them about why you need money, go back to the well. Large campaigns do this over and over and over again. I mean, they really wear out their donors. If it's between wearing out your donors and losing, wear out your donors. So go back there and talk to them again, but try to talk to them in between times that you ask them for money. Don't just let them be a glorified ATM machine. Make sure you give them some time and attention. Are there any conservative candidates who are running for office or who have lost that might share a good donor list with you? Sometimes people have just lost. It depends on how your races are staggered in Wisconsin. Sometimes people have lost previously, or sometimes people are running and you say, hey, I'll give you my list of good donors. Will you give me your good list of donors? And maybe you can get somewhere with that. Make sure that you have a good, clear way to communicate your path to victory. This goes with Can You Win? It's late in the game, but if you can put together a couple of page documents, My Path to Victory, with some articles, if you have polls, usually with smaller races you don't, strategies, feedback, endorsements, coalitions, give people a reason why they can give to you. And don't be embarrassed about closing the sale. How many of you out there have had pledges hang ad infinitum forever and you never collect them? And it's always embarrassing once somebody says, and I'll admit as much, they say, sure, Jim, I think we can help you out. Well, you have to ask them, well, how much do you think you could do? Which seems like a slap in the face. They've already said they will help, but you have to do it. And then you have to go one step further. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your pledge of $1,000. Would it be okay if I came by and picked that up at your office tomorrow? And it stinks because it feels like they've said they'll help you, and then you've kind of, especially I'm from the South here, people are funny about money, and now you're going to ask them how much they're going to give, and you want to come pick it up and know when you can get it. Yes, that's what you have to do. You just have to do it. So don't feel embarrassed about it. Get that cash in hand. And one thing I want to point out here is sometimes grassroots candidates particularly want to get caught up in things like phone banking and knocking on doors, and all that's very important, and I think you should get out there with your volunteers and do it, and it's a good thing. But a volunteer can knock on a door and make a phone call, and let's say that they're only 70% as effective as you, or 50%, or whatever. Well, if they're out there for 4 hours, and they've gotten you a bunch of votes. That's awesome. But they cannot get on the phone and raise you money. You're the only person, usually as the candidate or somebody on a finance committee, that can really raise money. So it's just like if you can drive a nail with a wrench. You really can. I've had to do it before. It's not the right tool for the job. So make sure that you're using the right tool for the job. You need a hammer to drive a nail. You can do it with other things. But just make sure that you're matching up the right people to the right campaign tasks, and don't neglect fundraising because you feel like you've got to knock on every door. If there's somebody else that can do that for you, then by all means let them do it. You don't have to do it all the time, but let them do it part of the time. What if you win? Let's say that you win. Make sure that you develop a donor appreciation program where you contact people to say, hey, how are you doing? And don't ask them for money. And you keep in touch with them so they don't feel like an ATM machine. You can continue to find new donors, but make sure that you really reach out to people. And that's very important when you win, because I'm trying to wrap this thing up. We've only got a few minutes, but I'll hang on as long as y'all want to hang on. I'm going to go to the attendee list. Again, if you've got background noise or if you've got a speaker with a lot of loud, if you've got like your microphone next to speakers that actually broadcast, you might want to cover it up or mute it or something. I'm going to try this. We're going to start unmuting people for questions here. All right, we're good. We're halfway through the list here. Let's see. Okay, I'm going through here. Somebody's in a wind tunnel. That person, if you'd cover it up. Or somebody's either that or a heavy breather, one of the two. All right. Sounding good out there. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up to questions. If you've got any, just go ahead and shoot them out there. Don't be shy. Somebody's got fun kids, at least, in the background.
Hey, Brandon.
Yes, sir.
Is there any way that I could get this thing downloaded here? I would really love to show this to my candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to actually take everybody on the attendee list. It'll probably take me till tomorrow to get it uploaded, and I apologize if I've sounded a little tired. I've got to have my appendix removed tomorrow, and I'm just feeling a little under the weather. But I can get it to you tomorrow, I believe, if I can get it to my web guy tonight.
Okay, because that would be wonderful as far as I'm concerned, Brandon, because the biggest problem I'm having right now is convincing the candidate. I'm the treasurer for his thing, and I've done this for years and years and years. And the biggest thing the only thing actually that I got out of your thing today was to try and convince him that he has to do it. You know, he keeps letting other people do it, and I keep saying, no, you have to do it.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there's, you can delegate authority but not responsibility, and in the end, the responsibility lies with the candidate to raise money. And as a fundraising consultant, all you can really do is organize his efforts, direct his actions, those kinds of things, but you can't. People don't want to hear from anybody but the candidate, and the smaller the race, the more they just want to hear from the candidate.
Absolutely.
Other questions out there, guys? Don't be bashful.
Brandon?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Pam Stevens, and I'm running for state senate here in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And my question is, when you're starting this, because this is grassroots, as grassroots as you can get right now. You talked about your first step being, you're going to your BlackBerry, your email list, those things, and just asking individuals for money. And I was looking at your page when you were kind of clicking through it real quickly with your different software that you had. Do you have something that would help us with that would kind of keep us organized?
Yes, ma'am. You can go to Campaign Treasurer. It's free to try. it's only $50 a month for most state and local candidates. Right now, it's just completely free to use. We probably won't even charge until after the campaign. I got it developed and up late, but the reason I developed it is because I was just so frustrated every time I'd work with state and local candidates. Everything was out there was just for federal races, and it was about $600 to $700 a month, and it was so complicated. Only people like me could use it that used it all the time. So I tried to dumb it down and make it very affordable, and you can find that on my website, and feel free to use it, and I'll even give you some training on it.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Hey, Brandon, can I just say hi to Pam?
Yeah. Hey, any time, guys.
No, I'm just saying, Pam, just know I'm right behind you. Anything I can do for you?
Oh, I appreciate that. And what's your name?
It's Dave Wyatt.
Hi, Dave. How are you, honey?
I'm doing fine. Okay, Brandon, you take it back over now, or Pam and I will just talk all day.
Well, guys, I try to get us off of here by 10 or close to it. If anybody needs to hop off, go ahead. But if you've got questions, seriously, I know people are always bashful, and it doesn't. There are no dumb questions on these webinars. If you'll just ask a question, even if you think it's silly, I'll just answer it for you. Anybody else out there need help? Specific questions? Well, if not, guys, y'all have been very kind. I apologize I've had to mute people. It's just when you get more than about 15 or 20 people on here, it gets real noisy and there's lots of feedback. I'm even getting it now, but I can talk through it because I don't have to think about what I'm saying. But American Majority is a terrific organization for putting this on. They have been wonderful to many candidates in Tennessee here where I am. And if you can support the organization, if you can go on their website, I'd advise you to do so because they really are making a difference out there. Guys, I appreciate you so very much for your time. If there's anything I can do for you, feel free to email me. I think you'll be getting some notifications after the fact. And I'll get back to you. Like I say, I'm going into surgery tomorrow, so it may be a day or so before I get back to you, but I'll try to get back to you. Thank you so much. God bless, and good luck out there and good campaigning.
Thank you, Brandon, and good luck with your surgery tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, dear.
And same from me, Brandon.
All right. So y'all have a good one.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.